This is the Local Real Estate Developer Podcast, where we share the stories of locals across the country who took that empty lot or that old building and turned it into something awesome that their community needs. I'm Kristi Kandel, and I've been a real estate developer my entire career. My co-host Raphael is a commercial broker, and together we're sharing the stories of locals making a huge impact on their communities. And what we've learned is you don't need millions in the bank or decades of experience to get started. You just need the confidence, tools, and the right people around you. This podcast is your chance to gain the confidence to get in the game, because real estate development isn't just for the insiders anymore. It's for people like you too.
Welcome to Local Real Estate Developer Podcast. I'm your co-host, Raphael. I am a commercial broker and investor located here in Louisville, Kentucky. And I'm joined here by my co-host, Kristi Kandel. Nice to see you again.
Hey, good to see you. Yeah, Kristi Kandel. I'm a developer, investor, and I teach locals how to become developers in their community. And today we have a fun guest, and I actually ate at one of the restaurants in a property that he owns when I was in St. Pete, Florida, and I'm very excited to kind of dig deeper into this. So, Raphael, I know I had heard him on your podcast first. Do you want to introduce him?
Yeah. Ray's an awesome guy. We met actually at Tyler Cobble's mastermind event in Birmingham a couple months ago. And so, we got hunkered down. Our flights got canceled. I think for you, you got your flight canceled because of the tornado that came through. And so we were kind of just hunkered down at the hotel, chopping it up and, got to kind of learn a little bit more about what he was doing. And I find it super fascinating because I actually did something somewhat similar in my local market. And so he's just been a phenomenal resource for us. And a good buddy of mine who's also my business partner, Barrett Goff, he's in his pod. And so, we're constantly asking him questions about different ways to approach the investment process in the retail space. And he's just a wealth of knowledge. And so I'm really excited to have him on the show. Ray, always good to see you.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate the intro.
Yeah. And he came in also, I forgot to mention, he came into Louisville for a race, and we actually got a chance to tour around and, we kind of showed him what we were doing. Barrett has this big office building he's developing with an Airbnb on top. And then I have this retail building that was converted into a bakery. And so we walked through the building and everything. It was really cool, kind of cool to hang out. So,
well, I'm embarrassed because it's a half marathon. We travel with a group twice a year and we do a half marathon in new cities. And I contracted plantar fasciitis like a month prior. So I literally was the very first race I've ever walked the entire race before.
Still but you did it.
15-minute mile, but it's so hard watching people run by you. When you're competitive.
The inner competitor and you goes, I know I can do this, but
just starting slow is cringing to me. But I made it.
So awesome. Well, what we typically like to do when we first get started is we like to learn a little bit more about the person and a little bit more about how they got interested in real estate in general. So if you don't mind kind of sharing a little bit about that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, for me, I was in Colorado at the time. I had, which I had mentioned to you, I have a background in doing construction and restaurants. And for a long time, I used to travel out to Colorado opening these restaurants for a chain called Hops Microbrewery. And when I would visit Colorado, I just fell in love with it. So I ended up moving out there, stayed there for 5 years, bartending, snowboarding, doing a bunch of nothing, basically. And I was like, I got to start doing something. I always had like side hustles going on. So I was talking to my mom one night and she had mentioned the real estate market and it just kind of sparked. So I met with a lady in Colorado that worked for Keller Williams and ended up interviewing with her. She'd give me the book, The $1 Million Agent. I read it. I was totally intrigued. Great book. I mean, for anybody to read, it's just a really great book, a great find. So ended up moving back to St. Pete 2004 and decided to get my real estate license and ended up actually going with a local broker instead of Keller Williams. I think that was a bad choice, but I stayed there for like 6 months and ended up finding some guys hustling, doing Section 8 investments. And that's kind of where I got my start in low income housing.
So were you their agent and helping them get it? Did you invest with them or what was?
Yeah. So basically they were doing short sales back in 2002, 3 before anybody was doing them. So I would knock on doors and get people to sign contracts, take them to the bank, and we would just short sell all day long. But as everybody knows, as the market went south, so did short sales. So it was great. I was a door knocker. I got paid a little bit, but I started buying the properties from the company. They would sell to me once we got them from a short sale. And that's kind of where I started in the process of doing low income housing.
Awesome. So from that point in time, you gained some experience on the real estate side by orchestrating some of these short sales, and then you started getting into the investment space yourself. So you started buying some of these properties. Can you kind of talk to us about the progression into that, and then what ultimately became what ultimately got you into the commercial space?
Yeah, I think for me, it was just like anything. You're seeing how much these guys are buying these properties for, and then how much they're renting them out for. And you're looking at the spread and you're like, okay, well, how can I find money? Where can I find money? And at that time, banks were pretty much just giving you money. I mean, if you had a heartbeat, you can get a loan. I was like, what do they call them? Like the ninja loans, the no doc
Hmm.
loans, or whatever they were back then. So, like, just show up, sign the docs, and you're good to go. So that was basically what happened. But I think the biggest takeaway I took away from the first 5 years in real estate was I thought the market was always going to go up, right? And that's what I was basing everything on. So for me, I was managing everything. I was doing all the construction and barely breaking even on these deals. Long story short, in 2009, when the market crashed, I had to decide, okay, I have 10 properties. Do I keep these 10 properties or I just let them go back to the bank? So I let everything go back to the bank. I filed the Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and then just kind of rebuilt from there. I had an insurance inspection business at the time. And in 2009, I kept seeing the market lower, lower, lower. I mean, I could buy houses around here for, 10 grand all day long. So that sparked my interest again, going back into real estate. And I started, buying. And that's where a lot of private money came into as well, and kind of learning about private money because the banks weren't lending then. So I'm like, I need to find this 10 grand plus 10 grand to fix it up. And then now I'm into these properties for 25 grand, where it still makes sense for a long time. And now cash flow is something that I need to focus in on so I don't relapse and do the same thing that I did back in 2000, 4, 5, 6, 7, and kind of learned. And that was a big learning lesson that I took away from then. And then as that portfolio grew, I needed an office. So ended up finding an office. It was an office with a 3-bedroom apartment on the top of it. And that's what kind of sparked the commercial side of it without even knowing, basically. And then ended up buying another office and then another office. And that's kind of how the commercial side kind of came to throughout, and kind of learning more about the commercial side.
So when you bought the next offices, I'm assuming your business didn't expand that much where you needed that many locations. Did you have tenants in tow for that, or you knew like who would be leasing them?
So it was my progression. So the first office I had, I think, for maybe 5 years, right? So call it from like 2011 to 2015 or 16. So in 16, I bought another office, which is a mixed use. It was an office on the front and then had 2 apartments attached to back. So for me, I was going to move my office in the bottom and then rent out the apartments in the back. But as I've told Raphael, in the front, being on a main corridor of Central Avenue, I knew that I had more capabilities with the zoning to do something different. And that's where my passion for doing a restaurant came into play. And, we'll go back to that with, the questions that you have. But that passion and doing that restaurant there really, really sparked all the interest moving forward and kind of having a more of a direction of what I wanted to do in that space, pretty much.
Yeah, that I was trying to figure out where the restaurant connection had come from just previously and hearing different pods. So that makes sense that you had experience with that out in Colorado. So that was a business model you were familiar with and what it takes. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So the question, I'm sure it is related to, kind of getting on the operational side on the restaurant space. I know we had talked about it on the podcast a little bit previously in my other podcast. Kind of interested to hear your progression into the actual restaurant business as an operator, and then your decision to pivot and focus in on the actual retail component from a leasing standpoint.
Yeah,
Because,
I mean,
yeah,
I absolutely had a blast opening the restaurant because I wasn't in a rush and it was just me, right? I had no chef, I had no partners. So I had to figure this all out from a box, right? So for me, that was one of the biggest passion projects that that I've done to date, because I knew how to run a restaurant. I knew how the flow worked in a restaurant. So for me, those were key components of like, okay, how does this restaurant operate? How do people flow into the restaurant? Where does the kitchen go? Where do the bathrooms go? Where does everything go inside of this restaurant? And once I kind of figured that out, and I wanted to do something that had green chili in the menu. And green chili for me was a big thing because of being from Colorado and also New Mexico. Both have different styles of green chili. And it's something that never made it really down to the south or the east too much. So I was like, okay, how do I bring green chili into Florida, like into this location? So I started going out to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and figuring out ways. I went to a cooking school for 3 days and started cooking with all the local chefs in Santa Fe, and did that like 2 or 3 times. Went out, ate food, ate at every restaurant you could possibly think of to get to feel like what's real chili, what's the real authentic New Mexican food. And once I figured that out, I ended up going back out with a chef, creating the menu in Santa Fe, and then coming back to Florida. And now I was on the hunt for a chef so I could start training them how to obviously cook New Mexican food. So once I found a chef, I had met this other lady in Albuquerque, flew her down to St. Pete to help train my chef. So as that progression kind of all happened, we get to the end where, hey, we're about to open the doors, and we had a big hurricane coming at that time. This is probably the best part. Knowing me, I've opened up many restaurants for another chain, so I love the pressure of opening a restaurant. So I'm like, all right, chef, we have to open the doors. I need a date from you so we can get rolling. He's like, I could see it in his eyes. He was super nervous. And I was thinking back in my head, I'm like, okay, this isn't going to go very well. 4 days before we open the door, he tells me that his dad is having some issues and he needs to go back to Virginia. I'm like, all right, well, just make sure I'm set up for success and I'll make sure we get through the first week. Well, he never came back. Long story short, I'm in the kitchen holding things together. And then boom, this hurricane comes. Well, the hurricane came the next week, but that Saturday, I literally had to shut the door to line down the road at 5 o'clock because we ran out of food. So if that's not really a story for, the first restaurant for opening, it's pretty crazy. So hurricane comes and it shuts down all of St. Pete for 4 days. So I'm holding on to all the pieces, the workers, the managers, the whole nine. And basically I was able to find a chef within that next week, met him, came in. I'm like, can you open in 2 weeks? He's like, yes. Came in, opened in 2 weeks, and 2 years from that date, we ran the best, coolest restaurant for 2 years. It didn't get quite to where I wanted it to go. There were things I would do differently in the future, but you learn a lot as you go and progress through that. So once I learned that, and then after that, when he closed the doors, I ended up throwing it on the market. And I knew that I had the only first gen restaurant kind of around in St. Pete at the time. So it was able for me to ask a premium in rents. And I think it was $35 a square foot at the time. And there were really no comparables up here because there really wasn't any restaurant. So I'm like, I know people are looking for turnkey restaurants. So let's just start with that. And then we got the $35 a square foot. And then that kind of gave me a baseline for the new restaurants that I started to open up.
I love that.
Yeah, no, and I love that concept too, because it literally is something that I'm doing locally in our market, similar type of concept, not to the degree that him, because he already had a fully functional second generation restaurant space that was ready to go, but just the unbelievable demand for that space in our local market. I'm sure in St. Pete it was probably somewhat similar. It's fascinating to me because anytime I have consultations with people who are looking to either start a restaurant or maybe they have a restaurant and they want to open up a second location, they're like, yeah, I'd like to have a kitchen that's already set up, because we understand the infrastructure requirements for a kitchen and the costs associated with that. I always tell them, I'm like, look, like it is super competitive. And if something comes available, you got to jump on it, because if you don't, it's going to be gone the next day. So I think you kind of tapped into a concept that is very replicatable if you can make the numbers work on the infrastructure side, because that's the biggest challenge there, is to provide what you can so that the restaurant owner can come in and do what they need to do. And sometimes you can find a tenant that's willing to put in a ton of money into their space, but obviously that's the challenge. But I'm excited to kind of dive into the rest of the other projects, because Ray has multiple projects now that have kind of followed somewhat of a similar model.
Yeah, and you just made a good point that you can duplicate this model in other markets, and it's something that we need to do. And I know I have a couple different sets of friends who were trying to get different restaurant concepts to come into their buildings, but then when they thought about the TI, the tenant improvement costs, the time, the money, versus their other workload that they're doing, because they're also managing these restaurants. And that's what I think I love most about your story, Ray, is how you're taking the heavy lift off, but in a super creative way. Maybe do you want to some feedback to that, and then also get into what that then turned into?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, what I experienced leasing out the first building, my restaurant, and how easy we leased it out. And then just got talking to the broker and just some other people locally, and just seeing how high the demand was. And just kind of figuring out that, hey, not like you said, not everybody has the capital to come in, or the vision even to look at a certain space and say, hey, we can turn this house into a cafe, or this office into a restaurant, or whatever it might be. So for me, I was like, okay, this is an opportunity. Let me find money to buy these properties, and then again, renovate these properties. That way I can demand the rent. And Tyler, who is our mastermind, talks about that. It's kind of like you're forcing the rent, because you're building in the rent into the property. So it was able to me to then again set another record at $40 a square foot. And I haven't gone over $40 a square foot yet, but I feel like that's on the horizon soon. It's just, it's harder, because I learned something valuable, I think, too, even in selling properties and in renting properties. It's like, you don't want to be too greedy. You kind of want to leave enough meat on the bone for the next person. Or when I'm renting, I want someone to be able to be successful, right? I don't want to squeeze every dime out of the tenant or the buyer. In theory, yes, you do. But also, if your cost basis and you bought things correctly, you shouldn't have to squeeze and worry about every single dime, but still get a price to where, hey, I'm giving you a turnkey operation to jump into, So it's kind of a balancing act, I think, in both worlds.
Yeah. Whenever I talk to people about rental guidance on different spaces, I always talk about a concept called rent to revenue ratio. So you've got to think about it from a retailer standpoint. Typically, you're going to see restaurants paying anywhere between 5 to 10% of their gross revenue associated with rent. You can maybe push that a little bit to maybe 12 to 15%, but then you're really squeezing the margins on the restaurant side. So if you do a back of napkin math and say, you're charging $100,000 for rent over the course of a year for the restaurant, that means they got to generate at least $1 million to justify that rental payment. And so how many restaurants can generate that kind of revenue? It's, a small cafe or bakery probably can't do that very easily. Maybe sometimes they can, sometimes they can't, but a full service is going to be able to pay more because they're offering a lot more, drinks, and they have more tables, their turnaround time's quicker. So that type of logic is important to have when you're looking at these spaces, because it informs the amount of rent you could likely charge and still allow for the tenant to succeed on site. So just something to consider.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I have to work backwards from that too, because I'm like, okay, well, theoretically, how many seats can fit in here?
Yeah.
And what's the cost
Huge.
average? Because if I'm building something smaller, they're going to have to charge a higher price per seat, to make it in this space, so how can they do that? And I'm learning, even with the tenants that I have, seeing what they're doing and seeing how they're kind of taking advantage of the space and maximizing it to basically its highest dollar,
Yeah. Yeah. And number of seats, to your point. And I mean, I'm sure in your market and in our market, we're trying to incorporate outdoor seating too. So if you can get like a little patio area, now you increase the number of tables by maybe another 10 tables of 4-top. So then you're talking about 40 extra people. That's a huge improvement in revenue potential for a restaurant. So just even having a patio can increase the rent that you could potentially charge for the space, which, obviously there's permitting involved and making sure that it's compliant with, everything related to the city. But, again, you pour some concrete patio and you have the proper, ADA compliance and everything. And that smaller investment could potentially lead to higher, price per square foot that you can charge as a result. So
yeah.
always.
I had a question. So in Louisville, if you have a patio, say, if I'm building a restaurant, probably having a smaller patio maybe,
Yes.
because you're only getting so many months out of the year, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, really, the patio is going to be used mid to late spring all the way up until probably late fall. And then after that, the patio is not necessarily going to be as used. But to that point, we do have some pretty big events that happen throughout the year. Like, we have the Kentucky Derby that comes in every year. So usually the month of May is gangbusters for retail and hospitality. So that can be a big month for a lot of owners. And so, a lot of times the restaurant owners, when they start doing their construction later in the year or early in the year, right, December, starting in January, they always want to be open before a Derby, because that's a big economic driver for the area. We also have various different larger festivals that happen. So depending on where you're located in town, you could be a beneficiary of something like that. So, having the flexibility to have outdoor patio space can be very beneficial if, in fact, you're in those type of corridors that support that. So, um, but yeah, but also you got to factor in all the other things associated with pouring a concrete um, patio, right? The water runoff. I'm sure the city's going to require certain things. That there may be certain other requirements related to ADA. So all those things need to be considered.
Hey, can we chat for a second? Since you're listening to this podcast, you're already thinking like a developer. You see the potential in your community, and you're ready to do more than just watch from the sidelines. That's exactly why we created the Local Developer Vault. It's a free resource full of tools, templates, and trainings to help you take action. And here's the best part. When you sign up, you'll also get access to our local real estate developer community. It's full of people just like you who are making real things happen in their neighborhoods. So don't just listen to the stories. Become the next one that we spotlight on our show. The link in the show notes to unlock the vault and join our movement. So you had mentioned earlier, so now we're talking about how the rents, and it's the same, I guess one thing on the rents, it's the same concept if you're renting out apartments or if you're renting out to commercial tenants. If you are stretching them so thin that they can't make it, you're going to have higher turnover to where they're going to leave to the next place that has cheaper rent. And then at that point, what's your cost of turnover? So I love the idea of going into this, like, of course, you want to make money, but at the same time, how can we be a partner and create a win-win-win scenario between the landlord and tenant? And I love that part. And then earlier you had mentioned I had to go find the money. The number one question I get from people is, I've got this component, but how am I going to find the money for a deal? Would you be willing to maybe talk a little bit to how you've leveraged private money or other money as you're growing these businesses?
Yeah, sure. Was even when I first started doing back in 2009, when I got back into real estate, I bought a course online. It was called the Private Money Blueprint. Very, very simple program. First, you start with your sphere of influence, your friends, your family, and then you kind of grow from there. It gives you like a script. You go out. I remember sitting for the first time, sitting in front of my friend. I'm like trying to remember all these little scripts and lines. And, nobody cares. At the end of the day, honestly, people want to trust you and they want to know how much money they're going to make. Is their money secure? Do they trust you? How much am I going to make? All the other stuff in between is just fluff. Because I'd say 9 out of 10 people don't even read into the details. They fully trust you. They will give you anything you want. So that's kind of where it started for me. And at my turning point in real estate, I had met a guy on the beach playing volleyball. And he turned me on to a guy in New York that was converting his IRA company from bonds to real estate. So once I got on with him, I had honestly, all the money I could ever deal with. I was using probably from him 5 to 6 million, I think, at any given time on small residential $20,000, $25,000, $40,000 properties. And it's crazy because I don't even use them anymore. I have one deal with them right now. So I was able to, along the years, keep growing, keep talking to new people, new friends, and just kind of, you grow this sphere. And as people become trusted in you, then you just gain that confidence and credibility for people so you can move forward. And as you start off small, you bring in these larger projects. You're like, hey guys, I'm moving up. I'm leveling up. This is what I'm doing. And then you can get into different structures. If you want a JV, if you want to syndicate, I haven't syndicated yet. I kind of like having a bank of, say, 12, 10 to 12 good, solid investors. And I would normally bring them in as more of a kind of like a bank where they hold the note and they just get an interest with points on the end. But the last project I did, I JV'd on it and just we did an equity split on the end, on the equity split on the equity and the rents. We just split it down 60-40. So I like that option as well because it alleviates me from paying anything up front. But if I work the numbers both ways, I'm like, okay, if I keep this deal, get the money and pay 10 or 12% monthly, how much am I paying over the course of 2 years? Or if I split it at 80-20 and, took 20, they took 80, what do I make? What do they make? So I kind of weigh every deal a little differently just to kind of see where the money falls. And, because if you're doing a GP, LP split, say 80-20, I don't mind doing that. I don't mind going out and just being, putting in, let's say, $1,000 investment into these projects and letting the LPs make all the money. I have no problem doing that at all. It just gives me more money. And that the course of 3 years, you've built a pipeline, where they're just constantly popping, hopefully.
Right.
So that's kind of how I look at it. And I think it's just been a building block, of building credibility and getting to the point where I am now, where I can just kind of have my bank of 10 to 12 people I can send deals out to. And except I'm always looking for obviously more people. I never turn the cash flow off.
Definitely. Yeah. So to that point regarding the, kind of deal flow and kind of finding those opportunities. So you had started your restaurant, operated it for a few years, decided to close up shop, and then you decided to lease out that restaurant space. You were able to lease it out very quickly, which is pretty awesome, at a record rate. So after that, what was your thought process there? And then maybe talk a little bit about what that next phase of your next project was.
Well, so when I bought that building back in 2015, a year later, there was a tenant in the building next to me. It was a small little, like, old dental office, like 700 square feet, but it sat on 2 lots up to the corner. And this is on Central Avenue right next to it. I'd cut down a tree and it was on the lot line. And the owner called me, he's like, hey, I heard you cut down my tree. I'm like, well, it wasn't really a tree. It was like a stub. So I got to talking to him and he seemed like a pretty good guy. And I'm like, hey, if you ever want to sell your property, just, let me know. So he gives me a call one day, maybe 3-4 months later. And he's like, hey, I'm getting all these offers. People are faxing me offers. I'm like, they're faxing you offers? I'm like, who faxes offers? But I guess he was. I'm like, well, what's the highest offer you got? I'm like, all right, I'll buy your property for that. If you owner finance it for me for the next 5 years at whatever percent, I'll give you, X amount down and we'll move on. Okay, deal. So ended up buying that property, 2 parcels from him. So again, moved my office into that small little building, right? And then same thing with their warehouse, did the same thing. Owner financing, took the office, rented that out to somebody else. I moved my office into the warehouse. Same thing, owner financed it. Now I sublet a lot of the spaces inside the big warehouse. So as I take these offices, they're zoned obviously for whatever. That next office, I didn't really turn into a restaurant until 2 years ago. The tenants from the restaurant that took over my old restaurant approached me about taking this space. And the reason why 700 square feet worked for them, because one, it was attached to the patio and they could bring the liquor license into that building and create another concept under the wing that they already basically had. But back to your point about the build out, it's in such a good area and they really wanted it. So they paid for the entire build out on that particular project. And that came after the 2 houses I converted prior to that, which I kind of skipped over because I'd bought a house on the backside of First Avenue South. It was a Section 8 house, but I knew the zoning was the same as on Central. And I think that's the restaurant you went to in between days?
I think so, yeah.
So that was an old Section 8 house, both units. There's a unit in the front, unit in the back. And that was a gut out. Basically what you do with those, you just gut them down to the studs and then open the entire thing up. And again, you just kind of design it as if it was your restaurant. The biggest challenge for that one was it had to have 2 ADA bathrooms, right? Now the parking is a little more lax on that zoning. I think it was 1 per 1,000. So it's 1 spot for the building, 1 spot for the unit in the back, and then an ADA parking spot. So I was able to do 2 spots, and then you do a bike rack for the third spot. And that's how they give you that third spot a lot of times. So ended up leasing that building to what they call in between days, which is more like I always get it confused. It's like a Japanese kind of speakeasy is what I call it, but it's sake and the whole nine. It's real. They curated it really cool. Like they did a
It
great
was
job.
amazing. So like when people worry, okay, if you don't have parking, people can't come to the restaurant. There's in St. Pete, we have all sorts of street parking and things that you can do, and you're used to parking and maybe walking a block or two.
Yeah.
There's or riding your bike or walking there. So from that standpoint, yeah, that part was super easy. And then you walk up, and it was the earlier in the evening, so the patio wasn't being used yet. But the way they had strung the lights, so by the time we came out from dinner, you could see how cool the patio space would be to have some cocktails and to hang out and talk to friends. And then inside, my goodness, like from an experience standpoint, we felt like we transported. I just went to Japan myself in 2024, and it was so nice to be like, oh, we have this place like this in St. Pete, and you feel like you're there, and they've done such an amazing job with that.
So he's like that owner was a big music star in Brazil, basically.
Oh, that makes sense for the records and the music. Oh, okay,
But
okay.
yeah, I know they play a ton of different music, but yeah, he was big into, vinyl, that era of things, basically. So yeah, he's been great to work with. He's been there coming up on his 5th year now, right? And then next would be the house down the road, same street. It's called Pistol House, and they're a flower wine bar. So
Yeah.
both of these all three were first time business owners. They'd run
Okay.
this Pistol House, they had never run a restaurant before. So I look at their business plan and I'm like, okay, it's unique. I'm like, I like you both. You have enough money in the bank. You can buy your FF&E. You can support some months of rent, right? So you kind of look at all those things. Excuse me. And I took a chance on them. And since I'm going to get back into the build of it. So this zoning is different than the house down the road. What they call this house is it goes from like a commercial traditional to commercial traditional residential. So with this one, they would only allow me to do what they call a mercantile space, and a mercantile space is basically retail zoning, and they'll allow you a small cafe inside the house, 25% of the house. So I was able to build a bar. I think it was like 300 square feet, right? And they only allowed me to put 6 seats on the plan. That's it. Everything else had to be retail. But what I learned from my architect who did other ones is that once you close the permit, nobody really comes back out and is going to tell you can't have more seating, basically. So it has now turned into a wine bar because they do more wine sales than they do flower sales. I think it was like 50% wine, 7% flowers, and the rest maybe food. So they have doubled in their first year what they projected. I think they
Heck
projected
yeah.
about 400,000. They did closer to like 750, which is amazing. Just
That's
selling
awesome.
wine, small food, no hood.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is 750 for that type of concept is not. I mean, that's
Because when
great.
you're running those small concepts, you have to be hands-on. It has to be like a team effort, husband wife team or partner and whatever, 2 people running maybe front and back or however that might work until you can build and see what kind of money you can bring in. Then you can start hiring as you go, front desk or chef or whatever else you want to do.
And do you feel confident bringing on these new business owners and operators because of your background and you know what it is and you can maybe ask questions and or do they ever ask you for help or support or guidance for setting up?
Let me think. Nobody's really, it's funny you ask that, and it's funny that nobody really, I mean, they have their vision, and they know exactly how they want to set up. I have the vision. In Pistol House, they caught me kind of at the tail end. So I gave them allowance for, say, flooring and paint and a couple other things just so I didn't put in whatever flooring. I like finding somebody prior to me finishing so I can add those
Yeah.
touches because I'm already going to do it anyway. So, but as far as advice, no, they don't.
They're like, I've got my vision, I'm going to go execute. And you know that you're providing them a space because you've thought through the flow and the functionality and how it could work. So you're helping them without them even knowing that you had that extra level of experience and
Yeah,
expertise.
there's small things they ask, here and there, but overall, like they just kind of do their thing and go about what they
Yeah.
have to do.
Yeah, and you alluded to the fact that when you looked at their financials, I mean, at least they had enough to cover the FF&E, and they had a certain amount of money in the bank to cover their rent for a certain period of time. Which, and again, I think with some of these operating businesses too, like they're all in because that's their livelihood. So it's another layer of value there where it's like, hey, if this doesn't work, it's like you're not making money. I mean,
Yeah,
so I
putting
don't
food
know.
on the table or paying your
Yeah,
bills. So yeah,
Yeah.
they're going to make it work.
Well, you kind of have to look at it. My thing is my intuition, gut feeling. I know for me, it's just huge. It's always been something I've relied on and always come back to no matter what. And I can kind of get a good feeling from people. It's somebody that I want to work with. What's my relationship? Because we said like these are my my friends, more than my tenants. We have a relationship moving into here. I want to make sure that you're successful so I can not worry about you basically. So for them and the other ones too, everybody so far has been successful. And for me, I think this could be part of a later question, but it's me building a team of restaurateurs because as I gain new traction on new projects, then I have, restaurateurs to pick from. Like, hey, I got a hot property in a awesome area. I think it'd be great to expand over here. I'll give you an opportunity, prior to it going on the market, or maybe we can work out something. Because if you're doing a larger build out, you want someone maybe to be invested somehow, some way. You want something in
Yeah.
it. It's not always best to do the build outs and take, people in. I've had success doing it, but because they're putting in some things, but not totally all in. If they were to go out and find their own building and renovate it and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know what I mean? There's a way there to both sides, I guess, depending on the project
Yeah.
and the size of it.
So it sounds like, and I could be wrong, but it sounds like from you're a single or a solo developer, but you've built that team of strategic partners from your private money lenders, from your restaurateurs, from brokers you trust in the market. Is that how you've kind of set up you have a team without necessarily having equity business partners or employees? Yeah, yeah.
I do not want employees. Like I have an assistant, great, but employees I have never really wanted. So I'll hire kind of like the 1039, my property managers. Everybody works outside of that. And we just kind of, it's like having employees, but not, right? So I think for me, I've never wanted a huge office with all these employees that I have to manage. I don't find that fun.
We say employees are the best and worst part of
Yeah.
running a business, and what real estate does allow is it allows us to have those that we have on a very specific project basis to where they can do that, and you don't have to worry about the whole operations of management of employees too.
yeah, yeah, and one of the things too, which I know we talked about in the past, was you the act of you doing some of these projects, especially in close proximity, you start creating a retail corridor. You start driving interest in an area, and so kind of talk a little bit about that corridor and how it's slowly starting to shift into a more of a vibrant retail area, and how
Yeah, I think it goes
what your
back
thoughts
to
are on
like
it.
your local driven community, right? You're kind of building into an area 8 years ago that had not much, right? You didn't have comps or sales to really go off of. You didn't have anything to really look at and say, okay, that's what I want to do. But I got to see a vision. I got to see that people are moving this way, right? That's kind of what I see. I can buy stuff cheaper this way. And then I can start just kind of saying, hey, okay, if the sector below me gets, $40 a square foot, what can I ask for? If they're getting 60, okay, can I go up? Are people moving this way? Can I get more restaurants down here? I mean, somebody has to dive in eventually and take that reign to see what we can do, because I just had nothing to compare to. And I can't, even going down out of our district is a whole nother district, and they can just demand because the flow had gotten there before us, obviously, because as it moved up central, I'll give you an example. So Beach Drive by the water, they can demand say $65, $70 a square foot. your district maybe gets around, say, 55. And then it just goes down as you kind of climb up Central Avenue and then basically cuts off at 34th Street, basically. So for me, back to your point, is just creating this community vibe to where, you know, I could walk out of my door and just walk to any of these restaurants. You know, it's more like family and creating more of like this legacy type feel for me moving forward. Things that I say now that I want to keep as more of a legacy build, you know, and just because I love the neighborhood, you know, and just kind of being involved in it. And then again, moving forward, it gives me the opportunity to help these people out as they grow and expand. And as I grow and expand, I can work with a lot of these people to do exactly what I want to do, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember you alluded to the fact too that the vibe of an area is very important because these properties that you have converted, they're more residential looking properties that happen to now also become kind of integrated into a retail use. And that's, I'm sure, kind of what people are looking for in that area versus, in a more, traditional retail, you may want a freestanding building with a drive-through and all these other intricacies. But because of where you're located, and that's why, understanding your market's so important, is that for that particular product you're trying to deliver to the market, that's what people are looking for in that area. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think the nostalgia of St. Pete, I think people really love like a grassroots story. Like, yeah, I started at the farmer's market, or I had a food truck and then the farmer's market, and then now I'm in a brick and mortar, you know, so people gravitate to that style because that's just how it is. And we're more in the more local, like sector of district in St. Pete. So, and then being in a house, an old bungalow house, I think people just love that because they just go and tell their friends. They're like, hey, we sat on a porch or in a house. It was cool. You know, the fireplace is still there, or whatever it is that I try to keep something, if I can, in the house, something nostalgic. I'm tearing down a house, not the house, but tearing down the inside of another house I'm converting. And I found an old brick. It wasn't a fireplace, but it was probably like a kerosene or maybe fire old heater stack. But it's a chimney, it's the whole thing. But I'm like, okay, well, how can I incorporate this back into the house somehow? Because you're basically ripping out anything nostalgic in it, you know, for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
You can get a fireplace or something along those lines to keep, yeah, for sure. But
the minute we looked up your properties and we got the vibe, like as locals, we wanted to go there. We didn't want to go to some traditional or some new national tenant brick and mortar, even though we knew it was clean and nice and fancy. It was there's something about that vibe that it's welcoming, it's unique, it's something different, and you know that the owners who are running the business are there and you're supporting local, and it definitely ties all together to where that's a unique experience that you're going to share about, whereas if you go to some other high-end or nice restaurant, you're not going to tell anyone about that. So you're definitely creating an experience for people.
I agree. Thank you.
So one of the questions I like to ask is what does the future look like for Ray? Like what are you looking to do as far as projects? What are you looking to do as far as, kind of your strategy for investing in commercial going forward? Yeah, I'd like
So
to
I
get a
have
chance.
currently just in that realm of commercial, I have 4 of those restaurants that are up and running. I have 4 more that I'm building right now. So I have
4 more. Wow.
3 that I have. Well, all of them are buildings. The warehouse that I bought that I mentioned a while back, I bought this in 2015. They allow 25% of the warehouse to be a restaurant. So I'm taking another chance in the Arts District to build another restaurant to create, again, another vibe. But this can be a bigger restaurant. It's like 1,500 square feet. And then I'll have like a patio outside of like 500 square feet. So I can do a full on restaurant, bar, I mean, whatever. So I'm building that. I have a meeting with the city to go over some details on that. I have another house that I just bought last month up in Central Oak Park, which is above 34th where we're at. But this sits on First Avenue North in a community where there are no restaurants, no cafes, nothing. So again, creating that nostalgic kind of vibe. It's a 90s house, so you can still work around that. The other one that I'm excited about that I have just got the permit for is the commissary kitchen that I mentioned. That's like a 5,000 square foot commissary kitchen and golf court. That one is kind of dated. It was built in 75 as a commissary kitchen. So I'm basically going in and upgrading everything. So for that, there is such a need for commissary space. And I think I'm just hitting the very bottom of it. And now that I'm getting tenants in there, we're walking the property because you're looking for someone who's growing in the market. And this comes to where, let's say I got a guy who's got 5 restaurants. He's doing baking in every single restaurant. Now he's like, dude, I need a hub, right? Okay, well, let me build you one. Or because you can't find them. You can't find a hub anywhere. So that's kind of where the commissary kitchen type hub. So it's got 4 coolers, a 12-foot hood, and you can do a small retail section in the front of it. So that's been interesting to kind of go through and just kind of develop and design. And then I bought a house across from In Between Days on the other side of First Avenue, which I'm now drawing the plans up. And I brought in the chef from my old restaurant. Now they're going to have their 3rd concept going in the house over there. But one other thing that I fell upon outside of the restaurant world is our group homes. I bought a commercial building, has 10 units in it. And per the license, you can rent the rooms by the room per license. So I was renting it to do what they call pad split. And pad split, you rent by the room. Have you heard of pad split?
Yep.
Yeah.
But go ahead and explain it just to make
Yeah,
sure.
so pad split is just, you rent by the room. You pay for all the utilities, the internet, you furnish the entire thing. And then this company comes in and they run the front end of it. So they have a website, you become a member, and you pay, let's just call it 900 roughly on average per room. But after expenses, maybe you're making 600, right? So that became big as we have this housing shortage becoming bigger and bigger. So I was setting this thing up nice, like it made it really nice. And I get a random call one day. This guy's like, hey, he's like, I want to rent a room. I'm like, I was kind of blowing him off. I'm like, because I don't do the rentals, And I was already streamlined focused to do this other thing. He's like, well, how much for the whole place? I'm like, what are you trying to do? Explain to me what you're doing. He's like, well, we rent to adult foster kids. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Let's talk more. So I met him at his house where he was running adult foster care in his rooms. And then I had another house down the road. I really like them. I like the mission. I like giving back. I've always liked giving back. I think that's why I kind of like doing the Section 8, but to a certain point. This to me would be more giving back. So long story short, end up signing them up for a 5-year lease. They handle everything like a triple net across the board. Ended up getting the 600 net per room. There's 11 rooms, with a rent increase every year for the first 3 years. So in year 3, I'm making 800 a room. So that took a value of say 850 the first year, 850,000 to year 3 being worth 1.3 million just in those 3 years. So I'm like, well, where can I find more of you guys that are passionate? So I've been going down a rabbit hole, just learning all I possibly can if I want to run these group homes, because you can pretty much 10x property, and the need is needed everywhere across the United States for sober living. But how I look at it from a larger standpoint is I would build a hub, say where you have like a pantry, a kitchen, transitional beds, and as people come in, you basically clean them up, figure them out, and then send them out to a home. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the next on my agenda outside of doing the restaurant space.
I love that. And I love that we get to do things that, yes, they can make money, but things that help the community, help people, and give them a second chance and provide some hope where maybe they didn't have it before. And because you took the time to care to help to put them into a new place and give them a chance, they get a new lease on life. So I love that.
Yeah, because for me, it's like, it's passion. What can I get passionate about? How can I give back to the community? Because the money will come. I mean, obviously, if I'm a business, I have to make money. As long as the numbers, work to a certain extent, I think there's a way to give back, make money. And I think for me, growing up in a low-income housing, I've just always been, like I said, driven to kind of be around those people somehow, some way. At least the ones that want to give back as well. And don't take it.
I think when we're from that, there's always something like how do we bring more people along and show them what we were able to find, and I love that. So clearly this is all community driven and it's amazing. And I'm so glad I got to experience a portion of it. What advice would you give to people who have heard this and go, oh my gosh, like this sounds attainable. Like this is something I could do. What advice would you maybe give to people starting out to help them on their journey?
Well, I think it's something like, for me, looking kind of throughout my career and where I am now, when I had the passion for the restaurant and the passion when it first started, I think that's something that you have to feel going and doing anything you want to do, regardless if it's real estate or life in general. Like, how can I be passionate about something and then the money will just follow? That's how I really, really honestly feel. But because people feed off passion, if you're passionate about something, everybody around you will get the bug. Like if you're running a company, you're the one leading the team, right? So for me, I think, find your niche, find what it is that you want to do in the marketplace. And it takes time, it takes, failure, just getting out there and just kind of showing yourself and just being a part of the community and going to networking events and just putting yourself out there, making calls. Like, you're not going to be perfect, and just when you meet the right person or you meet the right company or whatever it might be, I think you'll find that passion in something. And maybe it might take a while. Maybe you do something. I always tell people, you got to do what you got to do what you have to do to get to where you need to go, basically. So it's like, hop on it, make some money, get ahead, and then you can do whatever it is you're passionate about. I was trying to get so many people to just get in the real estate game when prices were $20,000. I'm like, I don't care if you hate real estate. I'm like, you're going to make so much money, and then you can do whatever you want to do. But no one.
What's the alternative? You're going to stick in a W-2 for your whole career that you hate and you're making someone else's dream come true?
Yeah, I'm like, I'll train you. I'll fund your deals. I'm a turnkey for you. And still, I must have tried to train five of my friends. It never worked out.
You got to have the initiative, really.
Yeah.
And you also have to understand how to overcome adversity. Because, I mean, any entrepreneurial endeavor, I mean, you described how your career started in one place and you went through some challenges and then you ultimately got to where you needed to go. But that's because of your mentality to say, you know what, I learned some lessons and now I'm going to go apply them to future deals. And now you're in a position where you probably never thought you would be, in a positive way, because you were willing to fight through that adversity and get to where you needed to go. And so I think that's the mentality that people have to adopt when they take on any entrepreneurial endeavor. And, either, I hate to say either have it or you don't, but a lot of times it's that you can train that mentality, but the person has to make it a reality. No one can make you want something. So, and that's how I had to learn that the hard way, because I used to coach people all the time in a variety of different capacities. I actually had people that reached out to me wanting me to coach them on how to become a high performing individual and stuff like that. And I had coaching clients that I felt like I was beating my head against the wall sometimes, because they just, I tell them what they needed to do and they wouldn't do it. And that's the realization I came to after a while. I was like, hey, just because I'm driven to do something like this doesn't mean they have the same desire.
Yeah, I agree. Plus, it goes back to having skin in the game.
Yeah, skin in the game's huge. Like,
there's nothing
when there's an axe over your head, you're going to be a lot more motivated.
If even if you put in $1,000, like something that could be your life savings, though, right?
Yes.
Just something that I know you're committed to doing.
That you're betting on yourself to go make that happen. Yeah. So good. Ray, thank you so much for being on the show. I know this is going to help so many people. If people want to support you, whether it's an existing restaurant to go to or potentially to reach out in some capacity, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
I think right now, like I told you, I'm redoing my socials, everything across the board. So LinkedIn would be a good one if you guys want to put that in the notes. And then obviously my email, if they want to reach out, you can put that in the notes as well. All the other ones, once I get them up and running, because I'm revamping everything and trying to be more social.
Sounds good. And as you get those, we can always go back and update the show notes too and drop those in as well. So awesome.
Well, Ray, really appreciate you. And we're looking forward to staying in touch. And I know we talk about it constantly, Kristi and I, but we're looking to try to eventually do something where we get people together to talk about real estate development as a whole. So maybe do this as a quarterly thing where we get together in different cities to walk projects and just get people together that want to get into development. And so looking forward to staying in touch in that capacity
That sounds good.
there. And for those of you guys who are watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It makes a huge impact on our ability to reach a broader audience. Along with that, if you guys are listening to this in a podcast format, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or some other streaming platform, please leave a 5-star review. It does make a huge impact, and we'll be able to reach as many people as possible who are interested in potentially taking on a development project for themselves. So thanks again so much for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.